The night Ivory Coast changed forever. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the streets of Abidjan fell silent. Then came the hum of military convoys. No sirens, no slogans, no warning. Just shadows moving with purpose. By sunrise, the flag above the presidential palace had changed, and with it, a nation's fate. But this wasn't just a coup. This was Ivory Coast, the West's favorite example of stability in West Africa, imploding overnight. It wasn't chaos that unfolded. It was a message, one the world couldn't ignore. And behind this sudden shift was not just anger, but a plan. A quiet rebellion years in the making. The rise and rot of Alassane Ouattara. Alassane Ouattara wasn't supposed to fall like this. In 2010, the West praised him as a reformer, a Western-educated economist, fluent in diplomacy, polished in his presentation. Ivory Coast, once shattered by conflict, was now poised for a rebirth under his leadership. But that image was a mask. Behind the handshakes and infrastructure deals was a regime tightening its grip. As Ouattara's second term neared its end, the Constitution clearly said he was done. But in 2020, he pulled a move that shocked even his allies. He ran for a third term, claiming a 2016 constitutional update reset his term limit. The justification was legal gymnastics. The reality? A dangerous precedent. Protests erupted. Dozens died. Opposition leaders vanished. And yet the West looked away. France and the U.S. issued muted diplomatic statements. Stability is important, they said. But stability for whom? Ivory Coast's streets were simmering, and the military was listening. The silent shift. Inside the army, inside the barracks, something began to stir. Ouattara had spent years purging rival officers, replacing them with loyalists. He centralized power, merged paramilitary units, and handed out promotions like party favors. On paper, the army was his. But real loyalty can't be bought. Young officers, men who watched their parents lose jobs, their brothers flee abroad, their communities rot, began asking dangerous questions. Why are we guarding a palace while people go hungry? Why are we arresting students instead of protecting them? Why are French soldiers still here? The older generals brushed them off, but the young didn't forget. They didn't forgive. Then came the spark. In 2022, a confidential memo warned of ideological contamination from the revolutionary wave in Burkina Faso. It was meant to stop a rebellion. Instead, it lit the fire. The whispers turned to plans. And Operation Renaissance was born. Operation Renaissance, a coup. Unlike any other coups d'etats usually carry the scent of chaos. Not this one. This was methodical, surgical, silent. In late 2023, the plan went into motion. Communications towers were mapped, power grids located, escape routes tracked, foreign embassy movements monitored. Lessons were taken from the failures in Sudan and the backlash in Guinea. This one would be different. Then came the moment. At 3:12 a.m., the first convoy rolled out. No noise, no drama. Target 1, RTI, state-run media, secured without resistance. A 28-year-old officer took the mic and made it clear. This is not a coup against the people. This is a restoration for the people. Target 2, Presidential Guard Compound. Shots rang out, but the fight was brief. Half had already switched sides. Target 3, the palace. By 4:30 a.m., its gates stood open. But Alassane Ouattara was nowhere to be found. Rumors say he was secretly escorted out days earlier by French security, his final exit from a country he once claimed to rebuild. Only now, the people were reclaiming it for themselves. The aftermath. No chaos, just clarity. No anthem. No tanks rolling through neighborhoods. No looting, just stunned silence, and then a flicker of hope. The military council appeared on state television. Calm, measured, no threats, just a clear message. We are not here for revenge, we are here for restoration. Within 48 hours, schools reopened. Markets resumed. The internet stayed on, something unheard of during coups. And a civilian transition committee was announced, made up of judges, religious leaders, economists, youth reps, and yes, even military observers. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't post-coup collapse either. It was order, and it was intentional. The ghosts of the old regime, but regimes don't just fall. They linger. Ouattara may have fled, but his fingerprints were everywhere. In the judiciary, the banks, the media. Within days, ex-ministers vanished. Some were caught trying to flee with foreign passports and bags of cash. Others were found hiding in safe houses. The new government's response? Calm but firm. This is not a witch hunt. We are dismantling systems. They launched investigations into election tampering, foreign transfers, and state asset looting. One revelation stunned the public. Over $1.22 billion had allegedly been laundered through shell companies in Paris, Dubai, and Mauritius, traced back to Ouattara's inner circle. Western banks denied wrongdoing, but the people didn't need proof. They had lived the consequences. Hospitals with no oxygen, schools with no books. While politicians flew private, audits began. Mining contracts were reviewed, and the French military presence re-evaluated. We are not against the West, the council said, but we are no longer for sale. The shockwaves. Across Africa, as Ivory Coast adjusted to its new reality, the world scrambled. France issued a cautious statement. The U.S. urged a return to democratic norms, but the continent reacted differently. Burkina Faso cheered. Ivory Coast has joined the march of African dignity. Mali called it a correction of illegitimacy. Even Ghana and Senegal remained quiet, an unspoken nod of approval. The African Union suspended Ivory Coast's membership, just as it had for Mali and Niger. But this time, the usual condemnation lacked fire. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't instability. Maybe it was a new form of sovereignty. A nation finds its voice. And then something extraordinary happened. The Transitional Council launched a national forum, broadcasted live, unfiltered. Ordinary citizens could send in questions to the leadership, and they did. Where did the IMF money go? Why are we still using the CFA franc? Why do we trade our gold abroad when our children die poor? For the first time in decades, the people weren't afraid to ask, and the government didn't run from the answers. Artists painted murals. Poets recited verses titled, "We are no one's colony." This wasn't just political change. This was psychological liberation. The handoff that shocked the world. 1 year later, the unimaginable happened. Elections. Real ones. Free of regime meddling. No French consultants. No ballot stuffing. Just open voting. And the winner, a civilian. Economist with no links to the old order. The military kept its word. It stepped down. The Transition Council disbanded. This wasn't just a coup. This was a clean handoff. A model. And while Paris, Washington, and Brussels recalculated their influence, Ivory Coast stood tall. Not in rebellion, but in rebirth. The people had found their rhythm again, their dignity, their voice. A new era, or just the beginning. Alassane Ouattara is now in exile, a fading figure, a relic of the old game. But Ivory Coast didn't just remove him, they rewrote the rules. From Abidjan to Ouagadougou, the message was clear. Africa is no longer waiting for validation. Sovereignty isn't something handed down. It's seized, lived, and protected. And in Ivory Coast, for the first time in a long time, the people weren't whispering anymore. They were singing. Because this wasn't just about a regime that fell, it was about a continent that finally stood.